anointed by the prophet Samuel to be the chosen king of Israel. Chosen by who? God. Every king who was a successor following that believed himself to be the one chosen by God to rule over Israel. No matter how he got there, if he was king, he was the Messiah. Herod Antipas, the son of Herod the Great, inherited the kingdom from his father after his father died in 4 BCE. Interestingly enough, 27 years before the Common Era, or what you used to call before Christ, the Romans were no longer a republic. They became an empire. Now, there wasn't a client king. There was a king who ruled under the thumb of Rome. Herod Antipas was a king who ruled under the thumb of Rome. He ruled, but he believed that he was called and chosen by God to be the king. And when these foreigners, these Persians from a foreign land, showed up on his doorstep and said, you know, there's a star up there in the sky that's telling us, it's giving us a message that there's a new king in town. There's a new Messiah in town. And King Herod is going, what? And I can bet you any amount of money that when he called the chief priests and the scribes of the people to discuss this with him, it wasn't to say, could you please tell me what's happening here? I'm sure he was saying, I'll come on the last one to know about this. These poor Matthean foils, as I call them, the wise men, the Magi from the east, are duped into being Herod's spies, to go and find the child and report back to Herod where he is, so that Herod can go and pay him homage. Matthew wants us to know in his story that resistance to the newborn king is already. That Jesus is already up against those who would oppose him. King Herod, the chief priests, and the scribes being those who began the resistance. They could have gone with the wise men, with the Magi. They could have gone on an adventure of discovery with them to look, to see, to investigate. But they didn't. They stayed behind, not willing to find out, resistant to discover what was there. Matthew tells us in the story that Joseph wasn't even in the house. In the house, mind you, when the visitors got there. When the Magi entered the house, not a stable or a manger here in Matthew's story, it's a house. And Joseph is, well, I don't know where he is. He may be off working somewhere. But they encounter Mary and the child. And they are so moved by the experience of seeing this child that they are changed from the inside out. Matthew uses the tool of their being warned in a dream. Everybody knows that when somebody has a dream, who's talking to them? God is always talking to people in the Bible. When they are warned in a dream, when they see something in a dream, that's God talking. And so Matthew's God has warned these foreigners that they better get out of town. And they decide to go back home the long way around and avoid Herod for all that's worth. But I think these 3 foreign visitors were changed forever from this experience. I think these 3 foreign visitors who went back to their country, who went back to Persia, pondered in their heart of hearts and in their minds what they saw on that night, and it lived with them forever. How many of you have ever taken a journey to a holy place? How many of St. Peter's in Rome? Let's see, Israel. Anybody ever been to Israel, to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre? Or anybody ever been to Sacre-Cœur in Paris? Yeah? How many of you have been to Lourdes? 1 or 2. In 1971, I was, and if I've told you this story before, I apologize. I will put it on my calendar that I've already told you this story, and I will never tell it to you again. In 1971, I was a brand new graduate from nursing school. I had been out of nursing school for a year, and I had always wanted to go to Europe. I wanted to go to Europe, and I didn't want to do one of those 2-week tours. That wasn't for me. I wanted to go for a couple of months. After all, in the 70s, that's what everybody was doing, right? They were backpacking through Europe. They were there for 6 and 7 months at a time. I know. I decided that I would go. Now, I had to do some major planning because I had to save my money. I had to save 1/3 of my salary for a year to lease a car and drive all over Europe. That was my plan. And so, I decided, they published a book that year, Europe on $5 a Day. Anybody remember that book? Yeah, what a joke today. Anyway, Europe on $5 a Day. I purchased that book. And the other book I purchased was Europa Touring that had all of the maps of Europe. And so when I was driving, I could find my way around. I wasn't on a tour. I recruited Christine to be my buddy, and Christine, who didn't drive, and I went to Europe. So guess who did all the driving? Belgium, Holland, England, Scotland, France, Monaco, Spain, Italy, Austria, Germany, back to Belgium. When I was in France, I knew I was going to see the Louvre. I knew I was going to see the crown jewels in England. I knew that there were things I was definitely going to see. But when I was in France, driving down the highway, I saw a sign for Lourdes. And I said, something said to me, you got to go see this place. Now, I have to tell you, I saw the movie, The Song of Bernadette, Saint Bernadette, perhaps just a couple of years before that, and I had been very moved by the film. I was very moved by the story of this young girl who had miraculously seen a vision of the Blessed Virgin Mary and had seen actually 18 visions within a period of 5 months in the year 1858. And I remembered how moved I was by the story when I found out that she had tuberculosis of the bone, and Gladys Cooper sat there at Jane Simmons' feet and was appalled that here was this child who discovered the healing waters of the grotto and herself could not benefit from them, and the tears ran down my face.